Before we jump into the story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Hello everyone, my name is Lily, and I was born and raised in Maryland, a place that many people describe as peaceful, with tree-lined streets and long rows of homes that seem to stretch endlessly into the horizon. It was in this serene environment that I spent the majority of my childhood, surrounded by the familiar comfort of my parents. My mother, Emma, was a woman of gentle nature, her kindness radiating from the moment she woke up until the very end of the day. Every morning, I would wake to the smell of her cooking breakfast, her soft smile greeting me as I made my way to the kitchen. Her presence made our house feel warm, no matter the weather outside. She loved my father, Daniel, a quiet, reserved man who spoke little but showed his love in every action. He was a man of responsibility, always working tirelessly to ensure that our family was taken care of. He might not have been one for many words, but his actions spoke volumes about his deep devotion to us. Our family, though small, was full of love. We lived in a modest house, simple but filled with warmth, laughter, and the kind of joy that only a close-knit family can bring. Everything in my world felt perfect at that time, or at least that's how I remember it now, through the lens of nostalgia. I thought my life would always be like this, quiet and stable, with my mother and father at the heart of it. But everything changed when I was just 15. One day, out of nowhere, my mother fell ill. It wasn't a long sickness, just a brief and sudden illness that took her from us far too quickly. It all happened so fast that I barely had time to comprehend what was going on before she was gone. The shock of losing her was something I could never have prepared for. I watched as Daniel, my father, the strong, silent man who had always been there for me, became a shadow of himself. The house that had once been full of laughter, the clinking of dishes, and the comforting sounds of my mother's voice became eerily quiet. It was as if a part of us had been taken, leaving a hollow space where warmth and happiness once resided. I continued with my life, but everything was different. Every day felt like a mere echo of the life I had once known. I would go to school each morning, and when I came home at night, it was still the same house, still the same kitchen with the same simple meals, but now it was just the two of us. No longer was there a comforting presence, no more gentle smiles to greet me at the door. The silence between my father and I became more palpable with each passing day. It felt as though the distance between us had grown, not just physically, but emotionally. When I turned 18, something happened that I had not expected. My father remarried. At first, it was a complete shock to me. I knew deep down that Daniel deserved happiness, but the idea of someone else taking my mother's place felt almost impossible. His new wife, Grace, was kind and gentle, and though I could tell she genuinely cared about him, it still felt strange. Along with Grace came her son, Oliver, who was only a year younger than me. This new family dynamic turned my life upside down once again. The peaceful world I had known was no longer the same, and I found myself struggling to adjust to the changes. I'll admit, at first, I was awkward around Oliver. We were supposed to be siblings, but it didn't feel that way. Everything about this new setup felt foreign to me, and I wasn't sure how to navigate this new family structure. Though Oliver never did anything to make me uncomfortable, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both outsiders, both trying to find our place in a situation we hadn't asked for. Oliver was quiet and reserved, and perhaps, like me, he was just trying to figure things out in his way. In the evenings, the whole family would gather in the living room. Daniel and Grace would sit together, chatting about their day, plans, or work, while Oliver and I would share awkward silences, neither of us sure of how to break the ice. There were times when I'd catch Oliver looking at me, and I'd quickly look away, unsure of how to handle those moments of eye contact. There was a certain confusion in the way we looked at each other, a mixture of curiosity and a silent recognition of the strange new dynamic we were both thrust into. Family meals, once a warm and familiar occasion, became an awkward ritual. We sat together, still in the same house, but the atmosphere had changed. There was no longer the easy conversation or shared laughter that had once filled our home. Oliver would often pick up food for me, a small gesture that seemed innocent enough. But to me, it felt different, as if something was quietly shifting between us. He didn't talk much, but there were moments when I would feel his eyes on me longer than usual, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was more to those glances. Perhaps I was being overly sensitive, or maybe it was just the feelings of a younger brother adjusting to having an older sister. But something about the way he looked at me made me question whether I was reading too much into things. But it was undeniable that as time passed, a certain underlying tension began to simmer between Oliver and me. Something neither of us ever acknowledged or spoke about directly. The feelings I should have experienced as those of a sister for her brother became increasingly harder to distinguish, and I could feel a subtle shift, an unspoken change. There were moments, especially during the day when Oliver was near, when my heart would inexplicably race, and I couldn't quite explain it. I despised that feeling, the way my body seemed to react to him in a way it shouldn't. I hated that I had begun to see him as more than just a brother, as if my mind was betraying the natural boundaries that should have existed between us. One night, as I was lying in bed, I heard the faintest sound of footsteps outside my room, soft and careful, like someone trying not to disturb the quiet of the house. It was Oliver sneaking into my room, as he often did. He never meant any harm, and at first, it had always been just a brief exchange. Simple conversations before he would head back to his room. But this time was different. He didn't leave as quickly. He sat down beside me, longer than usual, and his eyes locked onto mine in a way I wasn't accustomed to. There was something in his gaze, something deep and searching, that felt like it was probing beneath the surface as if he was trying to say something, but no words came. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. I didn't know how to react. The atmosphere between us suddenly grew thick and uncomfortable, and the silence that stretched between us became suffocating. I felt confused, unsure of what was happening or how to process it. The usual comfort of our quiet moments together had vanished. I hesitated, not knowing what to do, until finally I nodded slightly, almost involuntarily, silently inviting him to stay a little longer. We sat there in the dark, the room illuminated only by the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the window. We sat close, yet we were still strangers to each other in a way no one could explain. There was a tension in the air, discomfort mingled with curiosity, and something else, something I couldn't put into words. Truth be told, I had started to develop feelings for Oliver that went beyond the connection siblings were supposed to have. He was handsome in a way that I couldn't ignore, his features striking and alluring in a way that made my thoughts wander. I had never wanted to acknowledge those feelings, but they were undeniable. I often wondered if I should feel guilty for having them, especially since Oliver was my brother, at least by name. But these thoughts were fleeting, usually dismissed by my more logical mind, which reminded me of the practical realities of our situation. How we lived in the same house, how we shared the same spaces. Still, there was a growing discomfort in my heart that I couldn't fully shake. Oliver and I slept in separate rooms, though our rooms were on the same floor, just down the hall from one another. Our father and stepmother slept downstairs, and sometimes this arrangement led to awkward moments where the proximity between us became undeniable. Oliver and I were both at pivotal stages in our lives. I was a freshman in college, trying to find my place in the world, and Oliver was a senior in high school, preparing for the stress of final exams and the changes that came with graduation. We were both figuring out who we were in this new family dynamic, but the tension between us only grew. There were evenings when we sat in the living room after school, the soft flicker of the TV casting a dim light on our faces, but neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, as if we were both waiting for something we couldn't name. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that my feelings for Oliver were not normal for my siblings. I had started to genuinely like him in a way that transcended family love. It confused me. I tried to deny it, but every time I saw Oliver, my heart would beat a little faster and the world would feel a little out of focus. One evening, we crossed paths in the hallway, and our eyes met. There was something electric in that moment, something that left a mark. I couldn't ignore the way he looked at me. nor could I shake the feeling that something had changed in both of us. Then came the moment that would shift everything. My parents went away for a trip, leaving Oliver and me home alone for 5 days. At first, we saw it as an opportunity to relax, to enjoy the freedom of being without the watchful eyes of our parents. But that night, everything changed. We sat in the living room, the flickering light of the TV casting a soft glow around us. The movie we watched was nothing special, just a filler to pass the time. I made some snacks, dried squid, fruit, and a few cans of beer, an impromptu little relaxation after a busy week. We talked, laughed, and enjoyed the calm of being alone in the house. But then the movie shifted. A scene came on, a couple kissing passionately. It was unexpected, and for reasons I couldn't explain, the air around us grew thick. The playful atmosphere was gone, replaced by something unspoken. We both fell silent. I could feel Oliver's eyes on me, different from how he had looked at me before. His gaze now heavy with something I couldn't define. A warm, tingling sensation spread through my body, and I found myself frozen, unable to move or speak. I clutched the beer can in my hand, trying to steady myself, trying to make sense of what was happening. But before I could stop it, Oliver leaned forward and kissed me. His movements were sudden, his embrace strong, and I couldn't pull away. His kisses were urgent, as if everything that had been bottled up between us for so long exploded at that moment. I didn't resist. My heart was in chaos, but my body responded differently. At that moment, we crossed a line, one that I knew I couldn't undo. That night, everything changed. All boundaries were shattered, and I found myself lost in a whirlwind of emotions and confusion. What had started as something innocent, the quiet moments of two siblings, had transformed into something far more complicated, and deep inside, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. That night, Oliver and I were together, crossing every boundary that had ever existed between us. It was as if everything happened instinctively, as though our bodies and hearts had been carrying these suppressed emotions for so long, waiting for this moment to release them. We didn't say much. Words seemed unnecessary, as if our actions were the language we both understood. The closeness we had tried so hard to maintain was gone, replaced by something far more intense and uncontrollable. The next morning, I remember the light more clearly than anything else. The soft, warm sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting long, gentle shadows across the room. I lay there, next to Oliver, in what was supposed to be my peaceful sanctuary, the room where I had always found solitude. But now everything felt different. The room was the same, the stillness outside the window was the same, but inside me, something had irrevocably changed. We didn't say anything. We just silently exchanged a look, a moment that seemed to carry an unspoken understanding between us. Perhaps we both knew that from that moment on, our lives would never be the same. The weight of that realization was heavy, but neither of us said it aloud. We didn't need to. The following days felt like a suspended reality, a space where time itself had been altered. Daniel and Grace were still away, and we continued to make the most of that time alone. There was no longer the awkwardness that had once existed between us. Instead, there was a strange comfort, one that contradicted everything I had ever believed in, yet felt undeniable. It was as if we were living as two people in love, free from the prying eyes of others. Meals were no longer the family gatherings they used to be. They became private, intimate moments shared only between me and Oliver, where the conversation was just for us. Every night, we would sit together, watch movies, talk, and finally fall asleep in the same bed, as though we were a couple who had been together for years. During those days, I allowed myself to forget reality. I convinced myself that Oliver and I weren't just siblings in name, that we could live as we wished, free of the rules and boundaries that society had placed on us. Everything happened so naturally, so easily, that I couldn't stop it. Every stolen moment, every touch felt inevitable. I lost myself in it, in him, in us. But, as with all things, it couldn't last forever. The day came when my parents returned, and everything returned to the way it had been before. Oliver and I resumed our roles. no longer as two people who had crossed the line, but as siblings under the same roof once again. We acted as if nothing had changed, as if every moment we shared had been nothing more than a fleeting dream. My parents didn't suspect anything. They were caught up in their excitement about their trip, chatting happily about their travels. And Oliver and I, sitting there in silence, exchanged only glances, knowing that our secret would remain just that, a secret. In the months that followed, Oliver and I continued our secret relationship, keeping it hidden from everyone around us. The stolen moments, the long, sleepless nights became almost habitual. Whenever my parents went to bed early or left the house, Oliver would sneak into my room, and we would find comfort in each other's arms as if there had never been a barrier between us. During the day, we went back to acting normal. Family meals continued as usual, and my parents remained oblivious. Oliver and I exchanged glances, speaking volumes with our eyes while the rest of the world remained unaware. This hidden relationship, this secrecy, slowly began to consume me. I could feel the guilt creeping in, gnawing at me with each passing day. It was always there, lurking beneath the surface, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't bring myself to end it. Every night, every moment with Oliver became so familiar that I feared I wouldn't be able to escape it. I knew it had to end, but instead of stopping, I started taking birth control pills, doing whatever I could to keep our secret safe, to control it. I convinced myself that I could keep everything under control, that we would never be discovered, and that we could continue to live this way without consequences. Then, about a year later, everything changed again. Oliver graduated and moved away to another city for college. The physical distance between us made it harder to maintain our relationship, even though I didn't want to admit it. No more secret nights, no more stolen moments. The relationship that had once been so intense and all-consuming now had to be put on hold. And though part of me was relieved, another part of me still longed for what we had shared. I decided to move forward with my life. I applied for a job at a digital company, not something spectacular, but enough to give me some stability away from the emotional turmoil I had been living through. It was during this time that I met him, the man who would change my life forever. He was the owner of a large hair salon in the city, a man who exuded calm confidence and charm. From the moment we met, I was drawn to him. His strength and gentleness were unlike anything I had ever experienced before. Every story he told and every look he gave me made me feel safe, something I had never felt in all the years I had struggled with the secret I was carrying. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 2 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could build something real, something lasting. And for the first time in my life, I felt as though I was in a relationship where I could truly belong. We fell in love quickly, far quicker than I had ever anticipated. Everything seemed to happen so naturally, like we had been destined to find each other. There was no hesitation, no confusion, just an overwhelming sense that this was where we were meant to be. When I met him, it was as though everything in my life up until that point had led me to him. He became my anchor, my safe harbor, and soon, our connection deepened. Before I even realized it, we were married, building the family life I had always dreamed of, one that I never thought I would experience, given the storm I had gone through before. For a while, I allowed myself to believe that all my pain, all the confusion and guilt I had been carrying, could be forgotten in the joy of our new life. We had a child together, a precious little soul who brought so much joy and light into our home. It felt like the missing piece of my life had been filled, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. The days we spent together, my husband, our child, and I, were a balm for the wounds of the past. The laughter of our child and the tenderness my husband showed me helped to momentarily push aside the ghosts of my past. But no matter how hard I tried, those memories were never completely erased. Sometimes, in the quiet moments when I was alone, the memories of Oliver and the secret days we shared would creep back in. They didn't visit often, but they were persistent, like shadows that would slip in during moments of weakness. They would remind me that, no matter how far I ran, the past was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. And when those memories came, they brought with them an overwhelming sense of guilt. I had moved on with my life, or at least I thought I had, but it felt like I was constantly running from the truth of who I had been and what I had done. The truth was, I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to completely forget it all. Oliver and I had shared something that went beyond the boundaries of family. We had crossed a line that I couldn't undo, and no matter how much I tried to push it out of my mind, I knew it was still there, lurking in the background of my thoughts. But now, I had a family to protect. I had a husband who deserved my love and loyalty, and a child who needed me to be the mother they deserved. That was my priority now. That was what mattered most. I couldn't let the past destroy the life I had worked so hard to create. Yet, despite the peace I had found, a part of me still felt deeply conflicted. I felt a constant ache in my chest whenever I looked at my husband. He was wonderful, truly. He treated me with the utmost care, respect, and love. He was everything I had ever hoped for in a partner. But every time I looked into his eyes, I felt this crushing weight in my heart, a reminder that I was hiding something from him. The part of me that had once been open and vulnerable was now shrouded in a cloud of secrets. And with every passing day, that secret seemed to grow heavier. I didn't want to hide anything from him. He deserved to know the truth about my past, about what had happened with Oliver. But I was terrified of what would happen if I told him the truth. Would he still love me? Would he still see me as the woman he married, the mother of his child? Or would he look at me with disgust and disappointment? Would everything we had built together come crashing down in an instant, shattered by the weight of my confession? It wasn't just the fear of losing him that kept me up at night. It was the guilt of having built a life with him, of raising our child, knowing that I was carrying this secret. Every time he touched me, every time he spoke to me with such love and sincerity, I felt a pang of guilt deep within me, as if I didn't deserve the love he so freely gave. I knew that the longer I kept this secret from him, the more it would eat away at me. But what was I supposed to do? How could I tell him the truth without destroying everything? The thought of confessing haunted me. It kept me awake at night, twisting my insides into knots. If I told him, if I finally came clean about the past, would he ever look at me the same way again? Would he see me as a liar, a woman unworthy of his trust? Would he leave me, taking our child with him, and shattering the life I had finally come to cherish? I was terrified that my confession would cause everything to unravel, that the life we had built together would collapse beneath the weight of my past. But on the other hand, continuing to live with this secret felt like carrying a boulder inside my chest. It was heavy and suffocating, and it made me feel as though I was living a lie. I couldn't escape the guilt. Every day, it was like I was drowning in it, and I knew that if I didn't speak up, if I didn't tell him, I would never be able to truly move forward. How could I ever be fully present for my family when part of me was constantly haunted by the past? How could I ask for his love and trust when I wasn't being completely honest with him? I was at a crossroads and I didn't know which way to go. Do I confess everything, knowing that it could tear us apart? Or do I keep this secret hidden, protecting the life we have now, but living with the guilt and the fear that it will one day come to light? I couldn't decide, and the uncertainty was eating me alive. Perhaps when you hear my story, you'll judge me. You may criticize me for the mistakes I've made, for the hurt I've caused, and for the decisions I've kept buried deep inside. But at this moment, I can't help but ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to confess the truth, even though it could destroy everything you've worked so hard to build? Or would you keep the past buried, choosing to protect the family you've created, hoping that the truth will never come to light? I'm reaching out to you, hoping for guidance, hoping for some insight. I'm not sure which path is the right one, and I feel so lost. Your advice, your sympathy, your criticism, it all means so much to me right now. Please, if you've been in a similar situation, or if you have any thoughts, share them in the comments below. What would you do? Should I confess everything, face the consequences, and risk losing everything? Or should I keep this secret and protect what I have, knowing that I might never be able to escape the guilt? I'm at a crossroads, and I need help finding my way. Thank you so much for following Lily's journey. It's a story filled with complex emotions, difficult decisions, and the consequences of secrets that can weigh heavily on the heart. As we reflect on the twists and turns of her life, I want to ask you, what have you learned so far from her experiences? Is it about the power of family bonds, the guilt of carrying a hidden truth, or the importance of honesty in relationships? Perhaps you've taken away something deeply personal. I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and share one thing you've learned from Lily's story that you will bring into practice in your own life. Your thoughts and reflections are truly appreciated. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay connected and updated on more meaningful content like this. Thank you again for watching, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments below.